Hi, it's Katrina. The places in today's video are going to make you want to become an explorer. From the lawless wilderness of a jungle within a jungle to the tallest unclimbed mountain on the planet, let's check it out. Area 51 exposed. A secret entrance to Area 51 may have just been discovered, and it is freaking people out. Thanks to Google Earth, you can plainly see what looks like a secret entrance in the Nevada desert leading to what might be a branch of the world's most mysterious hidden base. There never used to be an entrance here. When you look back at satellite data prior to 1998, there is nothing at this spot. But when you look at images from 2003 onward, something weird starts to happen. The previously untouched desert suddenly gets a parking lot carved into it. Moving through 2005, 2009, and 2013, the parking lot gets bigger and more populated. You can see in recent satellite images that there are a bunch of cars parked in the lot. But there isn't anything there. There are no buildings, just one big parking lot full of random trucks and cars. No train station, no Starbucks, no gazebo, no picnic, nothing. But there is an entrance. You can clearly see the entrance to a tunnel, which must lead to somewhere underground. If there's nothing at the surface, where are all these people going when they park their cars and trucks? I think they are going underground. It's too bad that Google Earth doesn't have X-ray vision yet. You and I can only speculate over what's hidden beneath the landscape in this dusty part of Nevada. Most people think it has something to do with Area 51, or as it's officially known, Homey Airport. It's a U.S. Air Force military installation at Groom Lake in southern Nevada. It has been since 1955, when the CIA selected the area to test their new Lockheed U-2 high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft. President Eisenhower authorized the testing himself. The U-2 was put into service the next year, and Area 51 remained the premier destination to test and develop aircraft. After the Lockheed U-2 came the A-12 Oxcart, then the F-117 Nighthawk. I don't know who comes up with the names for these aircraft, but they're doing a really good job. In 2013, the CIA blew their own whistle, kind of. They released declassified documents of their programs at the facility. This was thanks to the Freedom of Information Act. It was the first time the government officially acknowledged the existence of Area 51. Everyone had known about Area 51, but up until 2013, the government acted like they'd never heard of the place. Hello, we know it's there. Unfortunately, the government didn't give away much. They admitted Area 51 exists, gave some details about the aircraft they developed there, and then radio silence. So, why the alien conspiracy? Why are people so convinced that Area 51 is holding alien bodies and extraterrestrial spacecraft? You can trace the Area 51 agenda back to Robert Lazar in 1989. Robert came forward claiming that he had worked on alien technology in Area 51. He told Las Vegas reporter George Knapp that he had seen the real autopsy photographs of dead aliens. It took the nation by storm. Robert Lazar was later discredited and disgraced, but it was too late. His outrageous claims spawned more conspiracy theories, and they have never gone away. But just because Robert was discredited doesn't mean that he was wrong. There is clearly something strange going on in the desert, buried deep beneath the sand. Don't you want to know where the strange tunnels found on Google Earth lead? The town that didn't exist, then did. In the 1930s, a town started to appear on maps of New York State. The problem was that the town didn't exist, but now it does. This is the insane story of how a fictional town became real. The town was called Agloe, and it is very famous for cartography nerds. It was shown in maps as a tiny fleck somewhere in the Catskills, at the junction of an unnamed country road and the New York 206. At first glance, nobody would question the reality of the town. It was south of a place called Shavertown and north of Rockland. Both those places sound more made up than the town of Agloe. The crazy thing is that this fictitious town was faked on purpose by the person who made the map. Otto G. Lindbergh was the director of the General Drafting Company. The name Agloe is a scramble of his initials and the initials of his assistant, Ernest Alpers. But why sneak a town that doesn't exist into state maps? It's because in the early 20th century, There was a problem with certain map makers stealing maps from other map makers. In order to stop people from stealing their maps and getting away with it, cartographers would slip their own unique fantasy towns or streets into their maps. It was like a watermark, a surefire way to know if a different company was stealing your map. It was such a popular thing for cartographers to do that it has a name. Fake towns are called paper towns, and fake roads are called trap streets. Otto and Ernest made their map and left Aglo in it as bait. A couple of years later, they spotted the town of Aglo on a different map made by Rand McNally, one of the General Drafting Company's biggest competitors. Rand McNally was caught copying red-handed. Only Rand had a really good explanation for why Aglo was on his map when Otto had made the place up. Rand claimed that he obtained the coordinates for Aglo from county records. It turned out to be true. Records showed that Aglo was home to the Aglo General Store. This was a real store, and Aglo did exist, but it was all a misunderstanding. The store had taken its name by looking at a map made by the General Drafting Company. It's a really funny catch-22. The store was named after the fictional town because it was on a map, thus making the fictional town a real town. When you go to Google Maps right now and type in Aglo, you'll see the exact place where Otto marked it on his map and where the old general store once stood. There is no town there presently, but it would still be a cool place to stop and see on a road trip. If you know of any other bizarre paper towns or trap streets, let me know in the comments. The Lawless Wilderness. One of the last primeval wildernesses left on this planet is called Javari Valley. People have gone missing in this remote landscape. The jungle swallows them and never spits them out. It's a smuggling route for cocaine traffickers, it's a hotspot for poachers, and it is filled with illegal loggers. You're not going to find Google Street View here. Scott Wallace called the Javari Valley one of the last true bastions of primal wilderness in the Amazon, and Scott is the foremost expert on the subject. Scott wrote an entire book on the last uncontacted tribes of the Amazon. The Javari Wilderness happens to be the last major refuge for indigenous Amazonian groups. It's not a place most of your friends are going on their 2-week vacation. The immense patch of rainforest is only reachable by sneaking down brown, mosquito-infested rivers along the border of Peru. Even if you make it in, good luck getting out. The area is about 33,000 square miles, making it roughly the same size as Portugal. It was in this dense and dangerous jungle within a jungle that British journalist Don Phillips went missing and then was found murdered. He disappeared on June 5, 2022, along with Brazilian indigenous Bruno Pereira. They vanished while traveling along the Itaguai River. They were there to investigate and report on the environmental and social challenges facing the region. Who knew one of the challenges they would face was being murdered? The killers were later caught and admitted that they had buried the bodies in the jungle. There is a reason this jungle remains unmapped. It's rife with criminal enterprise, treacherous terrain, deadly animals, and more unprocessed cocaine than Scarface could handle. A violent past in Fort Worth. There is a violent and bloody history waiting to be discovered underneath Fort Worth, Texas. It's a history that goes back to the days of lynch mobs, which honestly weren't that long ago. In May of 1913, Tom Lee Young went on a rampage. He shot 7 victims with his double-barreled shotgun, including a police officer named John Ogletree. The cops caught him and threw him in jail, but there was a riot that soon broke out in the streets. Thousands of men gathered, insisting the police hand over Young for a bit of mob justice. You might say they were bloodthirsty themselves. The mob entered the jail, searched high and low for the criminal, but couldn't find him anywhere. After a standoff of about 12 hours, the mob gave up and left. Little did they know that Tom Lee Young was hiding in a tunnel underneath the Fort Worth County Jail. The deputies had stuffed him down into their secret tunnel because they wanted to make sure he went to trial. They didn't want him tied to a horse and dragged through the streets. The tunnel that saved Young's life to bring him to real justice is just one piece of a much larger tunnel system hidden underneath Fort Worth. It was used to transfer prisoners and patients, for moving livestock, and as a convenient way to get from one place to another. There are so many tunnels beneath the modern city that historians don't even know where they all are. But I can fill you in on a few of them, like the tunnel that ran beneath Throckmorton Street in the 1930s. It wasn't very big, only about 6 feet high and 5 feet wide. The passage was mostly full of pipes, but it also connected the city jail with the public library. I guess the prisoners really wanted their books. In 2011, construction on the Hyde Park Transit Plaza revealed a piece of the old Throckmorton Tunnel. Local historian Kevin Foster said the tunnel was either an escape route for prisoners or for the officers themselves. The tunnel started at the jail and went all the way to behind the library circulation desk, coming out through a closet. There's also a tunnel underneath Main Street somewhere. In 1873, the Fort Worth National Bank was established as one of the earliest private banks in the city. As more banks sprung up along Main Street and First Street, then 7th and 5th, the bank owners had tunnels built underneath to connect them. One of the tunnels ran right underneath the ballroom of the Hotel Texas, which is now the Hilton Fort Worth. Just imagine how much old-timey money was wheeled through the secret subterranean tunnels. As of right now, nobody knows what happened to those bank tunnels. The bank was sold in the 1970s, and the tunnels were either closed off or filled in and forgotten. And now for a quick break because it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Crystals for the generous super thanks. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new here, subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. We'd love to have you. Our most mysterious oceans. When it comes to unmapped places on this planet, the ocean is at the very top of the list. Estimates vary depending on who you ask, but it's generally agreed that 80% of the ocean remains unexplored right now. That's a big chunk. We have landed astronauts on the moon and robots on Mars, but our very own oceans remain a mystery. But what is it about the ocean that makes it so difficult to explore? After all, it's right there. It all comes down to physics. Oceanographer Dr. Jean Carl Feldman from NASA said the ocean has almost zero visibility, very cold temperatures, and crushing pressure. Feldman said it's easier to send people into space than to the bottom of the ocean because of the intense pressure. Astronauts aren't crushed when they leave the atmosphere, but when you get to the bottom of the Mariana Trench 7 miles beneath the surface, it's as if 50 jumbo jets are pressing down on your body. You most likely don't feel it right now, but you are currently being squeezed by air pressure. There's about 15 pounds per square inch pushing on you as we speak. When you go into space, that pressure decreases to 0. When you go diving to the bottom of the ocean, the pressure increases 1,000 times. This is why people don't hang out at the bottom of the ocean. But what are some of the least explored places in the Great Big Blue? There is the deepest part of the planet, the Mariana Trench, but that would be too easy to talk about. Did you know that the second deepest place on Earth is barely 300 feet shallower? It's called the Tonga Trench, reaching close to 7 miles deep in some parts. It's been explored about as much as the Mariana Trench has. Both are deep pits of blackness that contain unknown life forms. In 2012, scientists found a deep coral reef off the coast of Greenland. It's been more than 10 years, and they still know almost nothing about it. Most coral reefs are in tropical places where the water is warm. Cold water reefs are totally different, like the one in Norway that is 8,000 years old. The living creatures of cold water reefs don't need sunlight for energy. They thrive in cold temperatures and total darkness. Speaking of creatures, how many different species do you think live in the oceans? Scientists say it is upwards of 2 million. Now, how many of those do you think have been identified? Roughly 230,000. There could be unimaginable sea monsters that no one has ever seen before. Another mysterious place is underneath the Ross Sea ice shelf. Research teams had to drill underneath the Antarctic ice to see the liquid sea hiding underneath. They found sea anemones that had never been documented. There were also weird crustaceans and upside-down swimming fish. Never before has such an extreme ocean environment been seen by humans. Scientists think the conditions underneath the Antarctic ice are similar to the conditions on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. This basically means there could be upside-down fish in space. A caving disaster in unmapped territory. Tragedy struck the caving community in 2019 when a man died while exploring an uncharted cave system. He broke his leg and workers spent 17 hours trying to get to him, but he passed away in terrible agony. Trust me when I say you do not want to fall 20 feet down a pit in an unmapped cave. The victim's name was Harry Hesketh, 74 years old at the time of his death. He was exploring the Curtain Pot cave system in England's North Yorkshire in June with 2 friends. They entered the cave at around 11 in the morning. Everything was going well for the first 60 minutes. Then the unthinkable happened. Harry lost control of the rope he was sliding down. It was dark, so his friends couldn't see what was happening. Bernard Walker, who was one of Harry's pals in the cave with him, said they heard a loud thud and a groan. Harry had taken a massive tumble and hit the ground hard enough that he shattered his thigh bone. What followed was described by rescuers as the most difficult extraction they had ever been involved in. They tried and tried to get Harry out of the narrow pit, but it was no use. And after almost a full day, Harry succumbed to shock and hypothermia. There is no news yet on whether the cave has been mapped. It was only discovered a little while before Harry's accident. England alone is littered with treacherous, hardly mapped cave systems. Highest unclimbed mountain. Doesn't it feel like every mountain has been climbed by now and every jungle searched for lost cities? It may feel that way, but it isn't true. Gangkhar Punsum is the tallest unclimbed mountain in the world. The mountain rises more than 22,000 feet above sea level at the border of Tibet and Bhutan. No one has ever even come close to reaching its peak. But not for reasons you might suspect. It's not the treacherous nature of the mountain that's prevented it from being climbed. It's the fact it's closed. You aren't allowed to climb it. The mountain is in Bhutan, a place that does not mess around with the outside world. In Bhutanese tradition, mountains are considered sacred. They believe mountains are the homes of gods and spirits. So, when Bhutan allowed foreign mountaineers into their country in 1983, they instantly regretted it. There were 4 expeditions that tried to reach the summit of Gangkhar Punsum, and each one ended in failure. After the last failed attempt, Bhutan prohibited anyone from climbing higher than 18,000 feet. There are other unclimbed peaks throughout the Himalayas. Nepal recently opened more than 100 mountain peaks to the public, with many of the summits over 21,000 feet. What kinds of strange secrets do you think are hiding on all of these untouched mountain summits? Let me know in the comments. The Hermit Kingdom. So I just mentioned Bhutan, the country that is home to the tallest unclimbed mountain peak. Most people haven't heard of it before and couldn't point to it on a map, which is precisely why I can't just mention it in passing without going into more detail. I think you'll be shocked to learn the secrets of the world's most amazing Hermit Kingdom. I'll start out by saying Bhutan was the first country in the world to go carbon negative. As of 2024, they've been joined by Panama and Suriname. Located in what you can think of as the lap of the Himalayas, with India to its south and Tibet to its north, Bhutan is mostly sheltered in hilly jungle. It's all mountains and rough terrain. 72% of it is covered in thick, largely unexplored jungle. Forget the Amazon. Bhutan is where the real pristine wilderness can be found. The people of the kingdom live in small communities that feel like they belong in the Middle Ages. They practice the same religious beliefs that they've been practicing since medieval days. Those religious beliefs are mostly the Mahayana and Vajrayana sects of Buddhism. The biggest thing that Bhutan has done to remain stuck in the 1400s is that they've kept themselves largely tourist-free. They regulate how many tourists can enter the country. They also make it extremely difficult for tourists to get in. You can't just get on a plane and fly to the airport on a whim. Up until the 1960s, Bhutan was closed off to the outside world entirely. This meant they didn't receive motor vehicles. They had no telephones, there weren't any concrete roads, and there was no electricity. While people in America were sitting down in front of the TV and driving cars to work, Bhutan didn't have a single phone number or rubber tire. But they weren't tribal like the uncontacted tribes in the Amazon. They were living in the Middle Ages. Things only started to change when King Jigme Singye Wangchuck came into power. In 2006, he willingly gave up the throne and welcomed democracy to Bhutan. This has to be one of the few times in human history that a monarch stepped down willingly without being bullied into it, all so that their citizens could rule themselves. Being a hermit kingdom has allowed Bhutan to grow its own unique culture. In that culture, they have an unusually nonchalant view on physical desire. It's in stark contrast to their neighbors in India, where adult themes are largely taboo. The people of Bhutan believe that following your carnal cravings can lead you on a pathway to spirituality. That's pretty progressive for such a remote jungle civilization. They are all about free love. How much of their jungles and mountain passes remain unexplored is still a mystery, but scientists do know that their forests are so wild and healthy that they make Bhutan emit negative carbon emissions. The city below Beijing. Beijing has its very own underground city, but you'll never get to see it. It used to be a tourist attraction, but now it's permanently closed. This video is the closest you'll probably ever come to exploring the 33 square miles of underground catacombs stretching like worm tunnels underneath the Chinese city. The complex is called Dixiacheng, a labyrinth of corridors, empty bed frames, and rotting vegetables for some reason. The subterranean world is vast beyond imagination, all of it dug completely by hand. This place is proof of just how good people are at digging. Work on the tunnels began in the 1970s for military reasons. Local citizens dug Dixiacheng themselves so that they could use the underground catacombs as shelters in case of an invasion. China, like everyone else, was worried about a potential nuclear attack or being invaded by a foreign nation. The people of Beijing needed somewhere to hide. This isn't just a little maze that everyone would scurry into and hide out in case of attack. It was massive, with more than 90 entrances spread across the city. You could access the underground town through secret doors in the backs of restaurants and businesses, and even people's homes. But has anyone ever lived here? They were definitely prepared to. Dixiacheng was outfitted with schools, barbershops, a roller skating rink, and even a movie theater. There were chambers and auxiliary tunnels for holding grain, weapons, and everyday supplies. The tunnels were outfitted to sustain a large population comfortably for an extended period of time. They even thought about how to grow crops in case they never left the underground. The builders had areas set aside for growing mushrooms, as if they might feed thousands of people with nothing but fungi. Thankfully, the atomic bombs never fell. The enormous underground shelter was never used for what it was designed to be for. Many portions of it were forgotten, faded into obscurity. A few of the tunnels opened as a tourist attraction in 2000, but like I said, now the whole thing is closed. Lost in the Namib Desert. At 55 million years old, the Namib Desert of Southwest Africa is the most ancient desert in the world. It's one of the driest places on Earth, and deadly too. It looks like you're on Mars, with sand dunes rising as high as apartment complexes. There are rugged mountains and gravel plains stretching across 3 countries, and hardly any of it has been explored. In the local Nama language, Namib means an area where there is nothing. Even the ancients understood that the desert was barren and terrifying. But seeing as it's 2024, shouldn't someone have mapped this place by now? Would you explore an inhospitable desert with daytime temperatures of more than 114 degrees Fahrenheit? A place where a mirage can lead you into the den of a pack of hyenas? It's in the Namib Desert where you can find the legendary Skeleton Coast, stretching hundreds of miles from southern Angola into central Namibia. It gets its name from both the whale carcasses that litter its shores and the more than 1,000 shipwrecks that have crashed into it over the centuries. There are bones of all kinds everywhere. The Skeleton Coast is one of few places on the planet where sand dunes sweep directly into the sea. When Portuguese explorer Diogo Cao discovered the Skeleton Coast in 1486, he was blown away. It seemed like the perfect place to explore. He and his men erected a cross on the sand dunes and began journeying inland. They soon realized that to go any further would mean certain death. They went back to the ocean in the safety of their ships. Diogo named the area the Gates of Hell. It had truly seemed like they had landed on the shores of hell itself. Don't get me wrong, parts of the desert have been explored. The Namib National Park is the 3rd biggest in all of Africa. Tourists come all year to check out the rolling sand dunes, especially Dune 7. It's more than 1,200 feet tall, making it one of the highest sand dunes in the world. But there is still mystery and intrigue. For example, the fairy circles. These things have been baffling experts for decades. Scientists still don't know what made the random circles that are spread across the desert, some of them almost 75 feet wide. Locals say the fairy circles are the footprints of their god Mukuru. Others believe the circles are made by small UFOs or by dancing fairies who only come out at night. What are your theories? Let me know in the comments. Mapping the world with Google. I think we should all take a second to appreciate the hardcore volunteers who have been walking across deserts with cameras strapped to their backs just to map unmapped places. People have been literally walking thousands of miles with Google cameras sticking up from their backpacks like robot eyes to document the world. It's a hard job. Since Google Street View launched in 2007, 87 countries have been mostly mapped. Google Street View has helped solve murders, catch cheating partners, and get people to the airport on time. You can even visit somewhere you've never been from the comfort of your own home in your pajamas. Take a trip to the streets of Kenya or a random town in Poland, but not everywhere is mapped. When Tawanda Kanhema tried to visit his hometown in Zimbabwe on Google, he couldn't find it. So he took a trip home in 2018 and started mapping places that hadn't been mapped yet. Tawanda visited 6 cities in Zimbabwe, driving 2,000 miles to add as much data as possible to Google Street View. He even borrowed a camera from Google to get it done. Another pair of volunteers is Wikuki Kingi and Tanya Wolfgram. Based in Tonga, the couple have been mapping South Pacific communities since 2017. They strap borrowed Google hardware to the top of their car and drive around mapping neighborhoods. These two are the reason you can take a virtual tour of Tonga right now. The Island of Zeros. Null Island is the center of the world. I mean that in the very literal sense. It is the place where the prime meridian meets the equator. It's also an island that doesn't technically exist. Have you ever wondered where 0 degrees north meets 0 degrees east? It's at the center of the world, in the Gulf of Guinea, just down the coast of West Africa and next to Central Africa. Some people call it Africa's armpit, since, looking at a map, it does kind of look like an armpit. Null Island isn't a real island, though. It's the name for the intersection of the prime orthodromes. It's where the 2 longest possible lines intersecting the planet meet, slicing our beautiful blue world into 4 quarters. Did you know that the equator line, cutting the world into the northern and southern hemispheres, was only made official in 1884 in Washington, D.C.? There's another cool fact to impress your friends with. What's the point of even naming this nothing area Null Island? Because it is where geocoded data goes to die. When geocoded data has nothing set as its location, it ends up getting its pin dropped at Null Island. This makes the non-existent island more of a data graveyard than anything. But it's not totally deserted. In 1997, the US, France, and Brazil installed 17 weather buoys in the South Atlantic Ocean. One of the buoys is moored to the seabed at exactly 0 degrees north and 0 degrees east, the location of Null Island. It measures air and water temperature at the center of the world. Secrets of Alcatraz. What do Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, Roy Gardner, Frank Morris, and Sam Shockley all have in common? They were all prisoners of Alcatraz. What none of these hardened criminals knew during their stay on Prison Island was that a very old military base was hidden under their feet. Laser scans and radar systems revealed a maze of military tunnels underneath Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. There is a whole hidden world beneath the abandoned prison cells. But how is this possible? And why didn't people know sooner? Archaeologists did suspect that Alcatraz was built over the bones of a military fortification from the Civil War, but it wasn't until 2019 that researchers actually found the buildings and tunnels hidden underneath the prison yard. The team of researchers, including archaeologist Timothy DeSmet from Binghamton University, said they found fully buried structures. These aren't just crumbling ruins under the prison, they are entire ammunition magazines and tunnels. Archaeologists had assumed these features were demolished when Alcatraz was built, but they were never erased from the island. Researchers are now drooling over what they might find next hidden beneath the surface. After Alcatraz was used as an official military prison, it was converted into a federal prison. The first prisoners started to arrive in the 1930s. They were the worst of the worst. The last inmate left the island in 1963. But what about before that? The earliest records of Alcatraz go back to roughly 1853, when engineers began planning the fortification. Could archaeologists find a hidden history even older? Maybe. In the past, everyone wanted to use an island in a strategic location for something. Have you ever been to Alcatraz? If you have, let us know what your experience was like in the comments.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Bent swords. Archaeologists have made a new and impressive find at the Wilsenberg Hill Fort in western Germany. Archaeologists used metal detectors to uncover an ancient arsenal of weapons buried beneath the remains of the old fort. Among these weapons were the blunted tips of lances and spears, shattered shields, and the remains of horse harnesses. The artifacts have been dated to between 300 and 1 BC, but archaeologists still aren't sure if they came from one massive battle or were accumulated over hundreds of years. Archaeologist Michael Ball says that the arsenal is the largest ever found in the area. The first weapons here were discovered by accident in the 1950s, though these newest discoveries were made between 2018 and 2020. The weapons were found close to the surface, suggesting that they had been left on the ground and then slowly buried as the years went by. But here's the most interesting part about the weapons. Archaeologists also found swords bent in unusual positions. Based on the extent of the damage, it looks like the weapons were destroyed on purpose, probably by victorious warriors who broke them as part of a ritual to disgrace those they had defeated. It was kind of like defeating your enemy and then breaking into their house and ruining all their stuff. Researchers working at other sites have noted that Celtic cultures would ritually destroy the weapons of their enemies. So why not here? Henry VIII's accident. Henry VIII is one of England's favorite and most infamous kings. He was a beloved prince who turned into a tyrant, changed the religion of the country, and beheaded Anne Boleyn, one of his 6 wives. He was also wounded in a jousting accident at the age of 44, and it was this incident that is said to have changed everything. Before the jousting accident, King Henry VIII was considered to be a kind and generous man. But after he took an ugly fall from his horse on January 24, 1536, he became a bit of a lunatic. He was jousting at Greenwich Palace when he got tossed from his horse, only to have his horse fall directly on top of him. The accident nearly cost Henry his life because he sustained a brain injury that historians now believe altered his personality. He became cruel and irritable, suffering from constant migraines. This change of mood ultimately led to him being one of the most hated kings ever and beheading his own wife. And it looks like finally archaeologists have just found the infamous jousting yard where the accident took place. Archaeologists discovered the jousting yard nearly 6 feet beneath the maritime Greenwich World Heritage Site, where Greenwich Palace once stood. The palace fell into disrepair and was demolished by Charles II. The team had to use ground-penetrating radar to locate the remains of the yard. They found the foundations of the viewing stands where spectators would have watched the jousting matches. But to find out more, archaeologists will need to actually dig up the ground and see what kind of relics they can discover. Lost City. In 2021, Egyptologists discovered a lost pharaonic city of ancient Egypt that they believe was once part of the fabled Lost Golden City in Luxor. The city dates back 3,000 years to the reign of Amenhotep III. It was also used by the famous ruler Tutankhamun. The discovery consists of mud brick houses, artifacts, and tools dating back to this time. This was during what many historians consider to be the golden era of ancient Egypt, when the nation was thriving during the 18th dynasty. What's truly amazing is that archaeologists have been searching for this lost city ever since the study of Egyptology began. They never found it until now. The city was built on the banks of the Nile River. It was once a large administrative settlement, and somewhere within is the mortuary temple of King Tut. Archaeologists even managed to find utensils that had once been used in the daily life of ancient Egyptians. Many of the relics, and indeed the broken structures, have not been touched by human hands in thousands of years. It's a wonder the city was lost for so long, considering it was found between the colossi of Amenhotep III and the temple of King Ramses III. Unfortunately for us, the discovery was literally just made, so we will still need to wait a while longer before archaeologists are able to see the full scope of their discovery. Medieval laborers. Archaeologists from Cambridge University recently studied 300 skeletons found inside of a graveyard and made some very strange discoveries. They used X-ray technology to discover that 44% of the working-class people buried inside the parish cemetery had bone fractures, whereas 32% of the wealthier people had similar injuries. According to the team behind the study, the results suggest that in medieval Europe there was an enormous disparity between the working class and the better off, with those who belonged to the poor or less fortunate suffering from more severe injuries on a more frequent basis. These skeletons were taken from the historic city center, dated back to between the 10th and 14th centuries when Cambridge was a blossoming provincial town filled with artisans and merchants, with a steady stream of scholars arriving in the early 1200s. The cemetery buried wealthy donors, clergymen, and even the destitute. But out of everyone buried in the graveyard, it was the working folk who suffered the most brutal injuries. According to a report from the BBC, this is because working life began at the age of 12 back in those days. Forget going to school and playing with your Pokemon cards. In ancient England, you were working full days at 12, usually doing some kind of manual labor like stonemasonry or blacksmithing. Jobs often resulted in crushed and fractured bones. This is in direct contrast to the wealthier citizens of Cambridge who didn't work as hard and didn't suffer as many injuries. Tutankhamun's warrior armor. Archaeologists have made some pretty interesting discoveries regarding King Tut's warrior armor. This story involves a garment that was discovered in the tomb of Tutankhamun back in the 1920s. The armor is 3,000 years old and currently housed inside Cairo's Grand Egyptian Museum. It's been around for about 100 years, but it wasn't until now that researchers analyzed the leather cuirass once worn by the famous king using a new technique known as reflectance transformation imaging. The images of the king's armor revealed hidden features, indicating that it was probably worn by King Tut and not used as an ornamental piece. This has created a kind of media frenzy, with reports coming out that the young pharaoh was a brutal warrior. But guess what? That probably isn't true. A study in 2010 published in the Journal of the American Medical Association hypothesized that King Tut actually had a rare bone disorder in his foot called Koller disease, meaning that he was more of a sick teenager than a young warrior. Now we have contradicting reports of just who exactly the most famous Egyptian pharaoh really was. Warrior boy? Sick child? Did he perhaps get carried to the battle wearing the armor even though he couldn't fight? Or maybe none of the above? A doctoral student from the University of Northampton even suggested that Tutankhamun didn't wear the legendary armor and that it was put into his tomb as a funerary gift. What do you think it was for? Let me know in the comments below. TRex lived in packs? Paleontologists studying a mass tyrannosaur death site at the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in southern Utah have made a pretty startling discovery. They unveiled in 2021 that tyrannosaur dinosaurs may not have been solitary predators like researchers previously thought. Instead, it looks like tyrannosaurs may have been social carnivores, displaying pack animal behavior like modern wolves. These dinosaurs may even have lived in primitive social structures, like many animals do today. This is despite the ferocious reputation of the carnivorous dinosaur. If it was such a hungry beast, how would it be able to live in a social group? Paleontologists figured this out using geochemical analysis of the dinosaur bones and the rock the fossils were found in. Researchers from the University of Arkansas figured out that the dinosaurs died and were subsequently buried in the same place. This suggests that they may have been living in something like a dinosaur den. They must all have been living together or came together for certain reasons. Even more fascinating is that the site in Utah is the third mass Tyrannosaurus graveyard discovered in North America. The big question now is what other ancient dinosaurs lived in packs, and just how socially advanced were dinosaurs really? We know most dinosaurs had pretty small brains, but maybe they were smarter than we give them credit for. The Aztec meet the Maya. A brand new archaeological discovery is suggesting that the Maya may have had direct contact with another famous civilization 800 miles to the north, the Aztec. Experts never imagined that the Maya actually met the Aztec, despite how close they were geographically. However, while the Aztec were located in present-day Mexico City and had a centralized political center and capital, the Maya were in the Yucatan and were not an empire, but more of a collection of city-states with shared cultural values. The Maya civilization dates back to around 1500 BC, but by 900 AD, many cities were abandoned, but not all of them. The Aztec, however, reached their peak from about 1300 to 1521 AD when they were conquered by the Spanish. However, that doesn't mean that they weren't in the area way before then and may have had contact with the Maya civilization. This new discovery comes in the form of an ancient temple hidden underneath Tikal, one of the most famous Maya sites. Tikal is located in modern Guatemala, while the capital of the Aztecs, Teotihuacan, is located today in modern Mexico City. Aerial imaging unveiled a buried pyramid underneath an otherwise unassuming hump of grass. What's really fascinating is that the ancient structure does not appear to resemble anything made by the Maya, but instead has all the markings of a pyramid just like the one seen in the Aztec capital of Teotihuacan. New excavations at this site have confirmed that the construction and the type of ceramics and weaponry found inside are identical to those from the Aztec culture. Archaeologists even found green obsidian that came from central Mexico, along with an artifact depicting the Aztec rain god. As of right now, we don't really know what the Maya and the Aztec civilizations were up to. Did they get along? Did they trade together or maybe fight against each other? It's honestly hard to say what the exact nature of their relationship was. All we know is that it looks like the Aztec had some kind of major monument in the Maya city of Tikal. Toll road dinos. Near Sao Paulo, fossils of dinosaurs dating back at least 80 million years were found during the excavation of a toll road in 2021. The workers were working on a project for rainwater drainage when they found the bone fragments of at least 2 separate types of dinosaurs. They found the remains of sauropods and theropods. However, we don't yet know exactly what kind they are. All we know is that they definitely found something. The construction workers also stumbled upon the shells of prehistoric turtle-like creatures, scales from ancient fish, and even crocodile teeth belonging to ancestors of modern alligators. Paleontologists worked the site for 15 days, trying to excavate as much as possible before the work continued. Judging by the fossils dug up here, the area was once either a river or a lake. One of the paleontologists who worked on the project explained that the region probably received crumbling sediments from higher areas during the Cretaceous period, 245 to 65 million years ago, resulting in many dinosaur fossils being swept down to rest at the bottom of what became a lake or a river. All the biogenic remains got trapped in mud, which turned into sedimentary rock and eventually, boom, fossils. Unfortunately, modern construction trumps the excavation of dinosaur bones. The paleontologists got all they could from the location and had to move on. The sunken settlement. Archaeologists have found a Bronze Age settlement in a rather peculiar location. This settlement dates back 3,000 years and was found in central Switzerland at the bottom of Lake Lucerne. A team of underwater archaeologists working with the city of Zurich made the discovery completely by accident while preparing for the construction of a pipeline. Lake Lucerne reaches depths of about 1,200 feet and until now was expected to be empty. But when the archaeologists began lifting chunks of wood and ceramic shards out of the water, it became clear that something important was submerged. The ceramics and chunks of wood were carbon dated back to the year 1000 BC. What this means is that whatever Bronze Age settlement is currently sitting under the water at Lake Lucerne is the earliest human settlement in the area. Absolutely nobody had expected to make this discovery. Archaeologists were able to identify artificially prepared piles of timber that had likely been used to build some kind of stilt house. Plus, there was enough evidence to suggest an entire village of stilt houses. Nobody knows which culture built the community or how it became submerged. We really don't know anything about the underwater village. Hopefully, more investigation can reveal this place's hidden secrets. Ancient safe. Archaeologists studying the ancient city of Pompeii, which was destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, stumbled upon a safe that managed to survive the blast and remain intact for over 2,000 years. The safe was discovered at a site known as Room 10. Room 10 was likely used as some sort of warehouse, and it was also discovered to contain 2 bodies. This strongbox probably belonged to whoever owned the commercial area. It's possible he was even one of the skeletons discovered inside of the warehouse. 2,000 years ago, this safe was the best security system a Roman could ask for. After all, it did survive the eruption and make it all the way into 2021. But what made the safe so safe? It was found with a 4-stage locking mechanism to secure the valuables inside. The safe was kept in the upper part of the building before it crashed through the lower floor during the cataclysmic eruption. The safe itself is fascinating, but unfortunately there was never anything found in it. Experts believe it could have been ransacked either during the disaster or sometime after it. Still, it's one of the most impressive safe lockboxes ever found from ancient Rome, and is still very well preserved. As a side note, archaeologists say that the presence of the safe suggests that Pompeii may have been rampant with criminal activity before the volcano erupted. Thanks for watching! Which discovery was your favorite? Which one do you want to learn more about? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because why not? See you next time!